Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Michelle, and today I'm going to be sharing some homeschooling advice that didn't end up working for me. So I'm about to enter my third year of homeschooling. I have a 10-year-old, 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old son, and they will all be doing some form of homeschooling this year. And when I was researching homeschooling and deciding to homeschool, these 3 areas I'm going to talk about were often pieces of advice given, and I wanted to talk about them because none of them really were great advice for me. So the first one was one of the first things I came across when deciding to homeschool was you need to pick a homeschool style. So whether that be Charlotte Mason, classical conversations, whatever you choose your homeschool style. You figure out your homeschool style. And I think this is generally not great advice because especially in your first year of homeschooling, you're exploring how your child learns or children learn, and more importantly, how you teach, what works for you, what you're capable, how the curriculum works with how you are able to teach. And I think if you go off starting by saying, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do this way, it goes bad. And I'm an example of that. So when researching homeschool curriculum and styles and things like that, educational philosophies, I was very drawn to 2 different things. I was drawn to classical conversations, and I was drawn to Charlotte Mason homeschool style. Now, 3 years later, I can tell you those don't fit me at all, and I know that, but I didn't know that in the beginning. And there were certain aspects of those homeschooling styles that I was drawn to, that I enjoyed, and I still think there are beneficial things in each of those styles, but they're not for me, and they definitely don't fit my kids either. But I think, especially starting out, we often imitate others we see, whether that be on social media or in our personal lives as well. You know, if you have a veteran homeschooler that's been doing this 10, 15 years and they're on social media or they're your friend and they're saying, oh, this worked for me, this and that worked for me, does not mean it will work for you. And I think a lot of us start out, like I said, doing what those people are doing because we think, okay, they somehow know what they're doing, so I'm going to try this. And it doesn't work that way because I think it's said so many times, each homeschooling family is unique, and that is really, really true. So I think a lot of us put those training wheels on our first year, and we are very influenced with those around us and on social media to try this or that. And it can be honestly really hard your first year starting out watching a lot of these YouTube videos and even having people telling you in your personal life that this is what you should be doing homeschool wise. It's hard because you're really unsure of yourself in the first year, and there are a lot of doubts that I think come with that first year of homeschooling because for a lot of us it's the first time we're doing something really different than those around us. You know, I didn't grow up knowing homeschool families. It's not very prevalent in the area I live in, so it was really stepping outside the box for my family. And it was helpful to get ideas, of course, but I think telling someone to, try just this style isn't beneficial. I think we should all really start out eclectic and trying multiple different things, and that doesn't mean bouncing from curriculum to curriculum, but being mindful that what you're reading can be beneficial and spark your interest, but it might not work out, and that's completely fine. Don't let anybody in your life, don't let anyone on social media tell you that this is the best or the only way, because there are many ways to homeschool. And I think exploring those different ways and kind of letting go of that fantasy homeschooler that a lot of us have, that, for example, the nature study and the peacefulness and the beauty of it. I think social media especially does a really bad job of giving you the highlights reel of homeschooling, and there are great things about it, but there's also struggles and hardships, and a lot of those you're going to feel your first year especially. It's going to be up and down roller coaster. It's not going to be picture perfect. You're going to doubt the decisions you've made along the way. That just comes with parenting in general. But when you stick your child's education on there, you feel so much more pressure on you to get it right. Or at least I do. That's my situation with it. But that first year, I really had to let go of that fantasy homeschooler. Like, I don't like going outside. I'm not a nature person. But I see these things on social media telling me, oh, I need a nature study. or an art study or all these different aspects. If you live in a state where you have requirements, yes, you should meet those requirements, absolutely. But if you're not a morning basket family, don't do it. Just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean you need to. You don't have to fit in to this mold of what a homeschooler is. You don't have to just do one style or one way of teaching something. I think when we go into things looking at, oh, this is great, and then we try to implement and we realize it's an absolute disaster, it's okay to let that go. It's on the steps of finding out kind of your path or journey in homeschooling and realizing, and you will really realize along the way what works and what doesn't. Now, that doesn't mean I think you should be switching from thing to thing to thing. I definitely think you should give things a try, and I think things like pushback are normal occurrences in homeschooling, so don't let that scare you that you're doing something wrong. But especially that first year, be open to trying different things. Number 2 is you should deschool or unschool your kids when you first homeschooling, especially if they're coming from a public school setting. I disagree with this. So my oldest daughter was in public school K through 2nd grade, and coming into a full-on homeschooling environment. Now, I did always supplement her public school education, especially in the summers and stuff, but I never full-on homeschooled her until her 3rd grade year. And if I would have deschooled or unschooled her, and she would have had more anxiety. She came from a very structured environment in the public school system. To not having any structure at all would have caused her more anxiety. She wanted to know what was coming next. She wanted to know the expectations for her when it came to homeschooling. And I think that's pretty across the board with most kids. For example, my 6-year-old is completely different than my 10-year-old. She's more go with the flow, doesn't really like organization and things like that, but she also greatly benefits from having a schedule. Now, it doesn't have to be a set in stone schedule, but a flow of our day. They know what's coming next. They know the expectations I have for them, the work they have to do, and they're prepared mentally, so they're not surprised when, oh, we have to do this or we have to do that. And there's very little pushback in my house because everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, especially me. I think if I had tried unschooling or deschooling, it would have made me as well more anxious. I'm naturally a more organized person. And like I said, I struggled a lot with doubt starting homeschooling, and I'm screwing my kid up, let's be honest. And really having those schedules in place, that plan in place, really helped me feel like, okay, I'm accomplishing the things I need to accomplish. And it's also keeping me accountable. Because let's face it, it's really easy to let things slide in homeschooling. Either you had a bad day, you're tired, that happens, yes. But you not being prepared continually is on you. So having a plan, having prep time is something that made me feel more confident in my homeschooling. Now, with my kids, like I said, they would have not benefited from that schedule. Now, even my 3-year-old is coming up in the ranks into preschool. He too has a routine, a schedule that he follows. And it's not set in stone. He doesn't have a certain number of activities or anything like that. I can definitely feel when he's done with something, and that's completely fine, especially at his age. But I think taking away all the structure when it comes to homeschooling is not a positive thing, especially when you're coming from a public school setting where it's so structured, it's almost like a shock. And then to have them do absolutely no structure and then try to build that structure back up, I think is like riding that roller coaster. I think it's much better to come into a situation when you're coming from public school, have some type of structure to outline for your child so they know what's expected of them. They know what the day is going to look like, because let's face it, they're coming from an environment where they're told what to do, when to do, and let's be honest, how to think about things most of the time. So going straight from that to nothing is, I think, going too far on the other end of the spectrum. And I think that happens a lot in homeschooling, where there's this anti-public school sentiment that anything public school is bad and we should be completely different away from that. I think there are, positive and negative things to public school, just like I think there's positive and negative things to homeschooling. That just because it's implemented in a public school system doesn't mean it's a horrible idea. And I think things like scheduling. So one of the things I do is, I worked in schools before I had kids, is we always had a schedule on the board. I've taught Sunday school for almost 10 years now. First thing I do every class is write the schedule on the board so kids know what's coming next. That I find really helpful for a wide variety of children, that they have an idea of what's coming next. So the last one, number 3, is I hear that you don't need to worry about socialization. You know, everybody outside the homeschooling world will ask you, well, what about socialization? And I think it really is a valid point. Now, I think there are many ways for children to be socialized. There's classes, there's co-ops, there's, let's face it, going to the library, going to the playground. There's all these options for kids, right? That they can meet other kids, they can play, and it's usually very easy for children to get along with each other. Now, I will say that I think when it comes to socialization, that we need to really be mindful that we're socializing our kids, not just within our own bubble, not just introducing them to people that look exactly like them, act exactly like them, or have the same necessarily belief system as their peers or themselves or their parents. I think we definitely owe it to our children to have a variety of experiences and people in our lives. And I talk about this in Raising Critical Thinkers, which I'll link up above, by Julie Bogart, about the importance of being around people that are different from you. So I definitely don't think bubbling your child is a good idea when it comes to socialization. I think they need a wide variety of experiences. But I really want to hit more on socialization for you as a parent and a homeschooler. I think this is so important because in your homeschooling journey, it can be very isolating at times, especially, like I said, if you live in an area where there isn't a lot of options for homeschooling communities, and you really need to have some sort of support system set in place. I would highly recommend before starting your journey, because like I said, you're gonna have a lot of ups and downs, especially that first year, your entire homeschooling journey, you're gonna have a lot of ups and downs, to be honest. But that first year, you're really struggling with that doubt, and am I doing this the right thing? It helps to have that supportive community behind you. Now, like I said, that didn't exist around me. The only homeschool co-op around me is a conservative Christian co-op with, again, nothing wrong with them, but in order to join their group, you have to sign a statement of faith that I don't believe in. And again, they were refusing to allow different ideas or thoughts into this group. So I knew right away that that wasn't an option. You don't need to change who you are in order to be accepted by other people. So if that's your only option, it's better not to be in a group setting. Honestly, if they're not accepting of who you are, or they expect you to fit into a box or XYZ, that's not the group you want to socialize with. I do have a group. When I talk about that in a video, I'll link it above as well. But having a group, I think, is important. Like I said, that group didn't exist for me. So another mom and I actually created a group that allows, all beliefs, all systems. We all have different faith backgrounds, ideas, different age children. Like, we're all accepted into this community, and it's awesome. And I think we definitely, that allows us to grow, not only as educators and parents, but our kids are allowed to grow as well. And I think that's really important, that having a homeschooling community, whether that be online or in person, is really important to have that group to lean on when you're going through those difficult things. Or if you just have a question, because like I said, we have different age groups, that there are things I'm encountering with my now 10-year-old that I'm like, okay, well, what's going on with this? Have you experienced that? Having someone to talk about different situations with, or just have a sounding board, or just have someone to listen to you, because let's face it, you're now surrounded with your kids all the time, and that can also be really overwhelming, which I don't think a lot of people, when people talk about it, they're like, oh, it's great, I'm with my kids all the time. I'm not one of those people it's great. I think it's really overwhelming at times. I'm very sensitive to my environment, and it's a lot to take on my kids all day, all the time, and be responsible for their education. And being able to say that aloud to another person and hear them say, yeah, I get it, is so, so important. To know that you're not alone in this journey, that you have a support system. And that doesn't mean you guys have to agree on everything. Like I said, we come from different backgrounds in this group, but we're all open and willing to discuss different things with people. It's not like you're wrong or you can't say that. So I think having that community is really important. And even if you have to create your own community, I think it really is beneficial. I think it does help in the long run, having our kids be able to form some of those longer term friendships. For example, like in classes or things like, or sports, that can vary from season to season or class to class. You're not always necessarily with the same kids. That I think in the homeschooling community, it helps to have these friendships. That way, when you're hitting 10 years old and life is getting a little rough for you, that you have that best friend to lean on that you've known for a really long time. So being able to cultivate those relationships, I think, is important for our kids as well. But also important to us as adults, to have an adult to speak to that understands some of the things we're going with, and even if they don't, are willing to listen to us and talk about it. I can't tell you how helpful that has been in our homeschooling journey, to have other people to just discuss things with, whether it be curriculum or struggles or things that have gone really well. I mean, no other homeschool mom is going to understand your homeschooling win quite like another mom, right? And it doesn't have to necessarily be mom. There are homeschooling dads, grandparents, many families out there. But having a support system, I think, is key. And socialization for both kids and adults is really important. I'm highly emphasizing the adults here because it can get lonely, it can be isolating. Having that group for yourself is also really important. It doesn't necessarily have to be a homeschooler. It can be other adults in your life as well, but I do think having a homeschooling community is beneficial for you and your children, whether that being joining a group that already exists or creating one because there's a need for it and no one else is there. I do have a video on how I started a homeschool co-op, different resources I use. It's completely worth it to me. So those are the 3 pieces of advice that overall didn't work well for me in my journey of homeschooling. I tried to pick a homeschool style right away. Lo and behold, I've become an eclectic homeschooler, very academically focused homeschooler. I've never deschooled or unschooled. We've always been structured and had an outline of our day and our plan going forward. And I made sure that my children have opportunities to socialize, but also that I have opportunities to socialize because it's really important. So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this below. Or if you'd like to share some bad homeschooling advice you have gotten within your first couple of years, let me know down below too. I think that would be really interesting to see. If you have any questions, let me know. If not, thank you for watching.